Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the November 4th meeting of the Reading Consortium. My name is Matt Den. I'm the co-chair of the consortium. Senator Lockman, as you know, usually chairs our meetings, and she's going to be joining us very shortly. She's listening in, but she wasn't able to be on camera for the first few minutes. So we wanted to get started, but she's listening now, and she'll be with us shortly. Before we get to our formal agenda, I did want to take note of the fact, as some of you may have heard, that former Governor Ruth Ann Minner has died at the age of 86. And our special guest tonight, Governor Carney, and I both had a chance to serve with Governor Minner. Governor Carney served as lieutenant governor for 8 years with her, and I had my first job in state government working as her legal counsel for her first 2.5 years in office. And I've seen there have been a lot of tributes that have been put out in the last few hours, all of which have really accurately recited the many ways in which she broke barriers and paved the way for others. For those of us who had a chance to work with her up close, she was also someone, as someone who had to really struggle to get her own education, a really passionate believer in the importance of education in providing opportunity to kids. And some of my most vivid memories of her are of her in meetings, many of which weren't publicized and weren't in the press, meetings with children in schools and community centers and in juvenile detention facilities, where she shared with them the obstacles that she had been able to overcome, and how important her own education had been in allowing her to do that. And she really, in many of those meetings, left a huge impression on a whole generation of kids. And Governor Carney, I know that Ruth Ann would want us to get on with our work, but I would like to ask everyone if we could first join in a brief moment of silence in memory of Governor Minner. Thank you. And if there's no objection, in order to maximize the really valuable time that we do have with our guest, I'd like to move our minutes approval to the end of the meeting and just turn the floor over to Governor Carney and his team. The governor and his colleagues have a presentation that they are going to make, and my understanding is that when the presentation's over, that time permitting, they'd also be willing to take some questions from the consortium members. So it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Carney and to turn the floor over to him for him and his team to share their thoughts with us. Governor, welcome.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry that your co-chair is not here with us, but will be joining us. And thank you for your words of tribute to former Governor Minner. She was special, and she broke a lot of glass ceilings herself, was a tremendous example for young girls and women as she did that along the way. She came up dirt poor, and I remember her telling me stories about her experience there as the daughter of a Sussex County small sharecropper, is the only way to put it. And my most precious moments with her were those stories that she told growing up in Slaughter Beach, and as a young girl during the war, they were holding German soldiers nearby at Fort Salisbury, and she has memory of that. And she was tough. If there's one thing that I learned about her, was if you're going to be governor, the buck stops on your desk, and you better be tough. And she was as tough as they come. And it's a sad day for us. The last time I saw her, though, she was really happy. She looked great. And that's the way I'm going to remember her. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt, to join you tonight for our presentation. We'll try to keep it brief so we can go to questions. In fact, I looked on the list of members here. Half the people here have already heard it: superintendents, members of their board, community activists. Really, this is a way, we think, to set the table for your work, whatever you decide to do. The most difficult thing, is we learned during the whole WEIC process, was figuring out whether redistricting needs to take place and how to do it. And that's in some ways the end game. That's something that we'll wait for your work. This is a big priority for me, probably the biggest priority in my last 3 years as your governor. I'm going to work hard on it until they turn the lights out on us in January of 2025. There's nothing really more important. There's nothing more important to me personally. Many of you know that my dad worked in the old Wilmington Public School District for most of his career in special services. So the services that the children with the most needs, had great need for, and talked often I heard him talk often as a high school student myself about the challenges that they were facing and the challenges that came his way and their way in the late 1970s during desegregation, where he moved up and finished his career at Brandywine School Districts. It's also it's more than a personal thing. It's obviously a huge public priority for us and for me, and I appreciate the work that all of you do. You're all educators by and large. You're all community activists. You're all folks that do this work every day. And I think the challenge that we face is coming together around a shared vision to provide for the least among us, the children that need our help the most, the education that they need to be successful. And what we're going to present, Jim Simmons is here, who's going to run us through it. John Sheehan, who's been working with us on it. We've presented to teachers, we've presented to districts, is we believe a good idea, a good way of improving what happens in classrooms across the city as we work to modernize and invest in the physical structure of the buildings, particularly in the Christina district. You may remember, and many of you heard me tell the story when I was first elected, after the WEAC proposal failed to get final approval, that we had to do something. So I met with all the superintendents at the time. They're all different now, different faces today than were there 5 years ago, members of their boards, to try to come to some consensus about the redistricting part. Everybody kind of agreed on, well, maybe it's time for Christina to move out of the city since they're not adjacent, but what's the next step? And nobody could come up with an answer that we all could agree on. So Dr. Bunting, she toured all the schools in the city and determined that the ones that needed the help the most, needed our help the most, were in Christina School District. At that time, they had 5 schools, Stubbs and Bancroft on the east side, Palmer and South Wilmington, Pulaski and Byard on the west side. They did not have enough students for 5 schools. And so we worked with the district to consolidate on the east side to Bancroft and the west side to Byard, and create an early childhood center and a parent support center at Stubbs down the street from Bancroft, right next to Howard High School. Things that the dual gen are going well. There's still a lot of important work to do. We are in the process of working with Dan Shelton. Dan's been a great partner, by the way, in our effort to recapitalize Byard and Bancroft, build a new Bancroft on the east side, which has taken a lot of our time and energy. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not just about facilities. It's also about doing things differently in classrooms so that children are able to be successful, having extra efforts to attract and retain teachers and educators in these buildings, and really engaging the community in a way that's really not happening to the extent that's necessary now. So we've got a proposal that really sets the table for anything that you might come up with, really essentially to basically create a education collaboration district in the city, where all the 3 districts and charters collaborate on improving what happens in classrooms across our city. So I'm going to let Jim talk about that, but I think at the end, really our request is to have you in your roles with school districts, with your constituencies, and as a Reading Commission to support this step forward, because you'll see at the timeline. So when I was first elected and we first started meeting and addressing these issues, the children that were in kindergarten and first grade then are now in 4th and 5th grade. And so we can't wait another minute to improve to make the improvements that are necessary, and we need all your help to do it. I've had meetings, endless meetings with all kinds of different folks over the last 5 years, and you get 10 or 20 people in a room and you get 10 or 20 solutions to the problem. The challenge is to get a solution that we can all rally behind, and that's what we're about, and that's what this proposal represents. So with that, Jim, you're ready to go, and you have going to share your screen. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to be with you today, and thank you for your opening tribute to Governor Minner.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you to both of our co-chairs for having us here tonight. I'm going to spend a few minutes sharing some thoughts that we've put together, and then if you have questions, you can use the chat to put them in, and if time's permitting, we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. So what is the Wilmington Learning Collaborative? It's a framework that we've adapted to try to mold to work in the city of Wilmington based on some other frameworks that we've seen that had some success in other areas around our country. John. So here's a list of a few of the challenges that many of our educators deal with. It's accentuated when we look at what happens in the city. Our city is divided amongst 4 to 5 school districts, 5 if you count Newcastle County Vo-Tech in terms of the high school piece. These feeder patterns cause disruptions to our transient families. The example I use is when I was the principal of Mount Pleasant, a kid who lives on 30th Street went to Brandywine. Their family moves 1 or 2 blocks over, 29th or 28th Street, and all of a sudden they go to Dickinson High School, which now becomes a new governance, new principal, new teachers, new curriculums, et cetera. I often say that that's how Byron Murphy and I's friendship developed, because when those things would happen, we would collaborate to try to make sure that we were being supportive to those students as they transition. We know that there's a teacher shortage nationwide, and Delaware is no different. And we also know that the teacher force isn't as diverse as we would like it to see. All of these things are factors that lead to high absenteeism and low achievement rates. Next slide, please. This slide shows some data around our teacher retention. So this is 3-year teacher retention, and it shows our state average of about 66%. And when you look at the schools in the city, all of them are below that. And the importance of that is that when you think about retention rates, you lose the ability to, one, have that curriculum be known, felt comfortable by the teaching staff. They're always relearning it. Districts, buildings are always redoing professional development and professional learning because they're always turning over new teachers. But the other part that's important is that you have a lack of engagement with families, because, for example, if you don't have that longevity of a teaching staff, then families don't have the ability to say that siblings can have the same teacher over and over again. You can build that relationship with families that helps to carry on that partnership that's so dearly needed in the world of education. And then you oftentimes have very young staffs. And so we know with young staff, there's a turnover rate for some other reasons that could be family oriented as well. Next slide, please. So here's what it would look like structure-wise. We're asking for our 3 main districts that are in the city, Brandywine, Christina, and Red Clay, to volunteer to participate in this collaborative. In this collaborative, it would have this trustee partnership that would support a small staff that would be put together to oversee those schools that decide to participate that are within the city limits. And we're calling that the Wilmington Learning Collaborative. And then obviously, and we'll talk about a little more detail in a few more slides, we would use the MOU process similar to what we did in Christina prior to my taking this role to try to make sure that we could develop that partnership. Next slide. So why would you join? The easiest answer for me is let's partner and try to get on the right side of history. This structure provides an opportunity to put a hyper focus on the challenges that I mentioned earlier. I think it's important for everyone to hear for me from the governor, on behalf of the governor and his office, that this isn't a blame game. I actually think it's a capacity game or a lack thereof. When you think about how the districts are, depending on the number of schools, and I can use some of the data, and I hope that I'm as close as I think I am. So in Brandywine, there's 2 out of the 16 schools in their district are in the city. In Christina, it's 4 if you think about the ones that we've closed, but it's 2 out of 24, 25. And in Red Clay, it's 4 out of 30. So largely speaking, 75% or so of the schools in their districts are not within the city limits. What happens is that you're either focusing all your energies there, or a majority there, or you're focusing all your energies elsewhere, and therefore it becomes a capacity issue, and someone is losing. I think this model gives us an example to add a resource of capacity for those districts who decide to participate. Next slide, please. This gives some examples of what this collaborative could look like. I think the cross-district collaboration would be huge, including the opportunity to have common curriculum, collaboration across the districts. I think the other part that I think is important is the collaboration between the community. When I think about the communities that these schools are in, and I'm using these as an example, the Powell Center traditionally serves Brandywine. United Way is partnered with Christina. Well, if we talk about in the city, then all of those community-based organizations would have the ability to partner with all of those schools versus the ones that are just in the district that they're serving. I think it gives us a chance for some innovative thinking. When you think about flexibility around spending, flexibility around scheduling, as just a few examples. The other part that I think is important for everyone to hear is that this is not a takeover model. All the schools would remain in the district that they're currently located in. Next slide. So here's an example of some of the targeted support that could be provided. For student support, we talk about the common curriculum, which I talked about before, which minimizes the impact of those student mobility concerns that I mentioned earlier. In terms of educator supports, we have the opportunity for teachers to serve on educator leadership teams, which provide input into their decision-making. And then we also have talent management. And when we looked at the mobility survey and exit surveys, roughly 70% of teachers say that they leave because of leadership. Well, this hyper focus would give us a chance to focus on leadership development, talent development, in order to help with that retention data we mentioned earlier and how vital that is. Next slide, please. Some of the additional investments that the state's willing to provide, and the one that I've said is probably the most important, is the pre-K investment, that we're willing to increase those seats. If in fact all 3 or some combination of all the districts decide to participate, we would take on the cost of the curriculum, whichever of those would be, and any incentives that would occur around staffing. And the professional learning. I'm sorry, I had to throw something in my throat. Next slide, please. Some other initiatives could include, and certainly I'm not going to read those things to you, but there's a potential of those, and the collaboration what they could produce. The staff and the community would have input into what these things could be that are beneficial to those students. I think the nonprofit organizations are looking to partner with organizations to be able to support them. And when you do that piecemeal, I think it's harder for them to decide where they're going to wrap their mind and invest their money. I think that if we can do that as a collaboration or a collaborative, it gives us a better opportunity to partner with our nonprofits and bring some initiatives that could benefit those teachers, students, and educators. Next slide. So what does this school operations look like? This board of trustees, and again, none of these names are written in stone. I think that we've been gathering feedback with the number of meetings that we've had, but the board would be made up of some trusted community leaders, the superintendents of the district that are participating, the school board members who oversee that section of the city, and then other education experts. I think the staff, and again, a smaller staff, and again, the titles aren't necessarily locked in that we decided that, but an executive director that oversees the daily operations along with folks who would oversee teaching and learning, the SEL and the family engagement piece that we talked about earlier, operations, and then again, the talent management to be able to recruit and retain the best that we can and retain them so that we can get that consistency within the buildings that we've talked about that were needed so much. The other part that I think is important is those educator leadership teams would have the ability to have input into decision-making. And I think that's a vital piece. We've looked at research and says that when staff have input into their decision-making, they're more willing to stay where they are. And then the other part we talked about was having some community input. How's it get done? We would have to negotiate MOUs. Obviously, we currently have an MOU in place with Christina School District that we had the opportunity to sit down at the table. I was not in the role at that time. Darrell Green was in this role, and they worked on an MOU that both groups, including their teacher unit or their collective bargaining agreement units, had a chance to sit around and collaborate and come up with that. We'd have to do something similar. And while there would be some things that would be similar across all the participating districts, I think there would have to be some that are different depending on the input from those districts as well. Next, John, I'm sorry. So here's what the timeline looks like this year, school year 21-22. I'm calling year zero, where we're trying to get this conversation out to see who's going to be willing to participate in hopes that the first year of this would start in the fall of 22. By year 23-24, we'd be in our second year and we would have Byard's renovations completed so that would have a brand newish school or completely renovated school. And by year 24-25, the third year, we would open up the new Bancroft, potentially open up a second dual generation center on the west side. I know that they're at capacity on the dual generation center in Stubbs. And so I think it's a definite need and an opportunity to open that on the other side of the city. Year 25-26 would be our fourth year, potentially opening a third dual generation center in some other location within the city. And then by 26-27, we would know that with the recommendation from the Reading Consortium would be in hopes that this plan would just kind of fuel that and align to the final decision that was made. Our path forward looks like this. We're presenting to school boards to share the framework starting next week and the week following. We'll continue to have those conversations with community members and boards during December. And then in January, we're asking for boards to give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down that they're in or out and that they're willing to participate and start to craft a MOU. During that month, January and February, continue that negotiation. By March, we would hope to have those MOUs finalized so that in April and June, we can start the planning and what does this actually look like, including that community engagement piece. And then July 1, using that as our fiscal year, would be the start of year one going into the fall. I know that we have a limited amount of time. And so I kind of went brief in terms of how quickly we went through the presentation, certainly not willing to read to anyone. And also to the governor's point, knowing that a number of folks on the screen have already seen it. I was not monitoring the chat. I don't know if there are questions in the chat or if to the chair, they want to field questions in some way pending time. I'm looking at my clock. It looks like it's about 5:25. So I will open the floor to questions as the chair sees fit.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a couple points. One is, one of the things I did not mention, I talked a little bit about setting the table. One of the other pieces of setting the table is the improvements that we're making in the Christina schools, so in Byard and Bancroft and the others. We're making them with 100% state funded. And the reason for that, and I thank the members of the General Assembly for supporting that, is whatever decision folks make, whatever recommendations you might make with respect to the redistricting question, right? And so that's an important component, because as I understand, part of the challenge of the WIC proposal was the complaint that the districts needed significant investment, and that both in the buildings and out. In addition, I would say that we are ramping up significantly opportunity funding, which goes, it's targeted funding for children from low-income backgrounds and English learners. In addition, additional funding has been approved this year for social emotional support in the schools, and so additional resources are coming. Those are commitments that, in part, we were pursuing anyway, but were part of the settlement of the lawsuit from the NAACP and the ACLU. So just some facts about funding and school facilities. So the whole idea is setting the table for your work, and we believe that it was and we know it was one of the ideas in your subcommittee, and we think it's the best way to proceed. Doing nothing, in my opinion, is not an option.
Thank you, Governor and Mr. Simmons, and thank you also for being willing to take some questions. And I think that Senator Lockman is now with us, so I will turn things over to her capable hands.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening, Governor and Jim, and John, I see also from the governor's team. So just wanted to thank you. I have been listening in the whole time, so I got to hear everything everyone else heard. I wanted to thank you for that. And I'm sure we have some questions and reactions or comments seeking clarity. So I'm happy to facilitate the time that we have to engage with that. So thank you for being open to questions. I would just ask at the moment if anyone, any member of the consortium has a particular question, you could just raise your hand. We're happy to call upon you to voice anything you feel comfortable voicing in response to the presentation. Just give it a minute. I don't see anyone racing to respond. It is a lot to absorb. I think there's a lot of parts and a lot of goals involved.
I did
Nope.
see that.
I see a brave hand. I do. All right, we've got Maria Matos would like to ask you something, Governor and Jim. Maria? Need to get you unmuted. Let me see if I can. I don't think I have the power to do that. So one of our hosting staff can unmute Maria. There we go.
Okay, so when I heard this presentation for the first time, Governor, one of the things that I had asked was about the budget, and I see that somebody else had put in the chat about the budget. Were you guys able to sit down and pull together a budget for this proposal?
We have, we've run some numbers with respect to the small staff that you saw there. We're also talking about investments in the early childhood side of things. There already is. We had a slide in the presentation, Marie, you may remember, about resources that are already going to at least the Christina schools there. And with the increase in opportunity funding, there will be additional funds, but we could get that in from a greater detail for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also see a question from one of our working group members, Don Alexander, wondering about charter schools and their inclusion in the plan.
Yeah, so we've made presentation to folks at the charter schools. They would be open to join the collaborative. And their question to us is what are the advantages for them in joining the collaborative? But obviously, if the whole idea is creating focus and creating some consistency across the city. We know when we were working on the MOU with the Christina School District, and I was knocking doors trying to get support for it on 8th Street, every other house somebody was going to it. The children were going to a different school. Some were going over to East Side, some to Edison, down the street to Bancroft. Some were even going outside of the city. And part of our the reason for our investment in Bancroft is to on the facility side is to create an attraction where a new facility where children and parents will want to go.
Thank you for that. Maria, did you have another question, or is your hand still up from before?
It's still up from before. I'll try to put it down.
No worries. Just want to make sure I wasn't skipping over you. One sort of logistical question, and then another substantive question, which I think is a good one I'll share. Will we be able to share the presentation that was given with our meeting materials as we normally would do? Is that something we'll be able to share for folks who want to take a look at the PowerPoint? I know I'm getting some feedback that people are digesting and would like to continue to digest. Is that material we can share?
Sure.
Okay. And let's see. Another question, which I think you probably have heard from some of us in the room who have heard the presentation, is how would you frame the incentive for districts to join in, since it's a voluntary collaborative?
Yeah, I think focus. I think Jim hit the high points. Focus, additional resources, focus on attracting and keeping staff, the consistency around curriculum. We have heard from some of the superintendents that it might create issues with respect to consistency beyond the elementary school piece of it. And so, but to me, it's about focus. It's about community engagement. It's about, as Jim said, it's about capacity. We're all in this together, and it sets the table nicely for whatever you might recommend or whatever we as a community might decide with respect to redistricting, which is probably the hardest issue that we have to address.
Absolutely. Another consortium member put a question in the chat. I don't know if she might like to read it herself. I don't need to read for Tika. Tika, did you want to explain her question?
I can. I asked how will teacher seniority be impacted by joining the collaborative?
Yeah, my understanding is that the teacher contracts would remain the same. We've had some modifications to enhance the benefits for teachers. I don't know whether Jim or John can comment on that, as I know that was part of the original MOU with Christina.
Yeah, so at this point, all the schools would remain in their district, and so would the teacher contracts in terms of their seniority would not be impacted. Now, if there was something that would be negotiated through the MOU, I think then that would be a different conversation. But at this point, you remain on your seniority list in the district to which your school is currently a part of.
And we did, John, didn't we negotiate additional pieces to that contract in Christina?
Yeah, and I know Dr. Shelton's on here as well, but yeah, that was a collaborative process. We had the MOU between the state, the district, the board, and then there was a separate MOU with the district and CEA that was negotiated. I think, I'm sure, Tika, you may have been a part of that. I know Dr. Shelton's on, he was a part of that, and I know that was just, I think, negotiated recently, and that's some exciting things in there. So it was certainly a collaborative process that we want to sort of model.
Thank you.
Okay, those were some good, oh, hold on. I know we're going to continue to see a couple of questions here. We'll answer a couple of more before we probably do have to move on with the agenda. But another question from an educator in the city that we all know and love, who's a important member of WEAC, asks, you know, can you share how you feel this could be different from things that we've done before? And could you speak to the need to have a stronger voice of student, family, and educator voice in the process?
Yes, so I think it accomplishes that, a stronger voice, a more focused voice within these schools. I think Jim did a nice job of explaining how that would work. You know, as a former principal at Mount Pleasant, he saw firsthand some of those things with respect to focus. And so I think it does accomplish that. You also have a chance, you intentionally are involving community leaders, education leaders, so that they feel more connected to the schools in the city, as opposed to boards that are, that, as Jim mentioned earlier, have responsibilities beyond the city limits. And so it's that focus. What we saw in Springfield, and Jim didn't mention the specific places, but we saw something that was really attractive when we went up to visit Springfield in 2017. And that was a model where these kinds of questions, the model was a good way of addressing them with respect to additional supports for teachers, focus among leadership and teachers in the schools, special arrangements in those districts. Let me also be clear about that. That was a takeover model, right? In the sense that the Massachusetts law required, schools that weren't meeting a certain achievement criteria had to submit to this kind of process. I remember very clearly asking one of the teachers in a little meeting, how did they get you to agree to all these things? And she said, well, they just made us do it. That's not what this is about. This is a coalition of the willing. And it's also, as I said, we believe strongly that it is a focus on trying to do things differently to improve what's happening in classrooms for these children that have special needs.
Thank you. I see, let's see, Margie Lopez Waite, who's a consortium member. I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask your question.
Thank you, Tizzy. Jim, you had mentioned that this idea came from some other models. I guess we benchmarked with other states and other cities. Can you just share with us those models?
So the governor just mentioned Springfield. Again, I wasn't in this role when the group of educators and stakeholders took a trip to Springfield, but we've been in conversations. John and I met with the executive director of models similar to this in Waco. There's another one in Denver, South Bend. We've seen it in Memphis. And so we've also reached out to all of them and have some data around success around some of the things we talked about. And the data point that sticks out in my mind was in one of the schools, and forgive me for not knowing which one off the top of my head, was that the teacher retention rate increased by 18%. And so that was one of the data points that stuck in my mind, was that this model was able to secure that. And so we certainly have done our due diligence. We actually have a virtual visit that we're trying to schedule to have some conversations about, I'm going to say, the do's and the don'ts and what worked and what didn't, so that we can learn and benefit from folks who've already gone through the process prior to us.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Just about the governance then, Jim. So are you saying that the board that's created this, trustees that is created to oversee these schools, do they have sole governance and therefore the district school board has no authority in the matter?
No, not at all. They would be a negotiated authority that those districts would say, we're going to give that authority to this collaborative, that they would oversee those portions. The other things would still be part of whatever the district that those schools reside in. And I think that's would be negotiated in a collaboration through the MOU process in terms of what decision-making process they'd be willing to delegate to this, I'm going to call it collaborative board.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I'm told we don't have to work on consortium members.
Good evening, everyone. Just a question, and I guess more of a statement. It was mentioned earlier in regards to the governance committee and this being one of our recommendations. And I will say right before COVID, co-chair Eugene Young and I, where we're headed in this direction, was very proud of the work that I thought could be accomplished through what we were calling the WIN, the Wilmington Improvement Network model, very similar to what's being proposed. And I would just say, and honestly, with the depth of my heart, that but from that point right before COVID till today, I feel totally different about the model. And in just the work that needs to be done, and how I just truly don't believe it can be done in a voluntary state. Really think our solution to me is going to be legislative, and I think it's going to come through the legislative process. I just don't see us getting accomplished based on what has transpired since COVID, and trying to just move some of these ideals forward. I think it's very challenging, and I see the big challenge with the governance and the power struggle between this body that's created, and the school boards. I just see it being the same struggle that we're having now, only through a different body. And I told my dear friend, our good governor, that I see the support, I see it as a path forward, but I think I see the challenges with it truly being implemented and being successful.
Well, certainly, Namdi, this is not the first time that Namdi has said that to me. And, my approach to all of this has always been to try to get people to agree, come around the table and agree to a path forward, as opposed to forcing people to do something which is what the legislative approach might be. I've learned a lot over the last 20 months about what people are willing to do and what requires, stronger action to get people to do it. I don't know that there's if there's support for a legislative solution, that's an option too. Our approach is for a coalition of the willing to come together around shared objectives. Everybody on the screen has the same objective: to provide the best education for these children. They need us more than any other student in our state. They all need us, but these are the children that have not been getting what they need to be successful in life. And it's our obligation. And it's going to be the number one priority for the next 3 years until they turn the lights out on us.
Thank you. I'm going to continue to elevate some of the chat questions from folks who are not full consortium members, and then allow any full consortium member questions to have the full platform. But we had a question from one of our wonderful staffers who's also worked on our work group, Shelley Rouser, asking what elements are built in the plan to create continuity across schools that were formerly in different districts and therefore different, operating cultures. Common curriculum is built into the plan. Oh, I lost it. But sorry, what elements will be built in for curriculum support and quality delivery, particularly since it will be new next fall? Hopefully that was clear. So continuity for districts that were formerly coming from different cultural places and practice, and what elements built in for curriculum support and quality delivery.
That's probably a question for Jim or John, but obviously, or Dr. Bunting. But obviously, if you've got a group that's working collaboratively, there's a certain consistency and all that. Jim talked about the professional development necessary to get the curriculum right and consistent and delivered in the appropriate fashion. Jim, do you or Dr. Bunting, do you have anything to add to that?
So I don't know that we can go out and say what's definitely would be included in those MOUs around continuity, but I think it's a conversation and the collaboration between those who are willing to participate to say, here's the things that we think that are important and we're willing to collaborate on. And I would argue that some give and take. When you get, the more people you get around the table, the harder it's going to be to get people to agree on a common goal or item. But I think that's where the power of collaboration comes into play. And so the purpose of having so many meetings, and I jokingly say, and I might even be right, that we've had 40 of these meetings, but it's to gather feedback and to gather input, because we're not saying that we have all the answers. We're saying we're willing to work with all those people who are involved to help get to those answers in the best, in the benefit of the kids that which we're serving, and the purpose of this collaborative is for.
Jim, I would add that once we settle on really good materials through that group interaction, training and continued support for the professional learning is so much more powerful as well.
And we did talk about that ongoing professional learning and that the state was willing to endure those costs. And so we do know that, again, the professional learning is vital in every district. And certainly when you talk about this collaborative, and then that retention piece, when you're not constantly having to redo professional learning and starting over from zero with the new staff. So again, attacking that recruiting and retention piece with the ongoing professional learning, I think becomes a dual impact that this collaborative has an opportunity to address.
Tika, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. One conversation that I've had multiple times with different families and community members, and they've shared that they find their calendar to be a challenge. So if they have a child that is in one district and another child in another, and they may be on separate calendars and so on and so forth. So with the collaborative, would there be the opportunity for them to all be on the same calendar, or would they follow their district calendars?
Again, I think that's something that comes out in the collaborative process. In my opinion, if you're asking, I think they should be on the same calendar. But again, I don't know that I would or should be making those decisions for a group of educators who have their opinions, their thoughts, their process. I think that's the power of collaboration, to be able to present the pros and cons and level set on what that final decision would be.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's something that came up a lot. I feel like when we were having post-pandemic equity conversation, that's a really good highlight. I am going to call upon Maria Matos again, and then
I just wanted to mention that one of the things that really attracted me to this idea is the autonomy of the school as it relates to the need of the child and the focus that it will have on the individual student. So if those are the needs, if that's our focus, then I can see us with this MOU being able to go through these challenges. As long as we stay focused on the school and know that if each school has the autonomy to be able to determine what is in the best interest of that child, this plan will work. That's what I have to say.
Well, I would just say that's the objective.
Okay. I think I saw another hand, but I'm going to highlight Representative Baumbach put a couple questions in the chat that I wanted to draw attention to. Again, some of these we may not have answers to yet, but I think they're good to cover. One being, would this possibly provide for any change to the process for a school board to consider teacher-pupil ratio waivers for schools in the consortium, in the collaborative? This is the right word to use.
So in the current MOU that we have with Christina, there is an agreement around class size. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's grades 1 to 3 will have class sizes of between 15 and 18. And so that was negotiated in the MOU with Christina. And that would, if that's something that the collaborative or those participating feel is important, then I think that's something that would have the ability to be on the table as an item to be discussed at that MOU process.
Okay. And another item here from Representative Baumbach, do you have a list of items that are candidate items to be considered included in the MOUs to be shared or even transferred to the trustee board from the traditional district board? Did I read that right?
I didn't hear all that. You're breaking up on my connection. I don't know whether Jim.
Oh, sorry, I've got a lot of background noise as well. I guess essentially, do you have a list of items you would consider candidates for the MOUs for being shared to the trustee board? I guess, sort of practical oversight items.
Yeah, I don't know that we have a list. I mean, I think obviously educators understand the issues that are important, some of which we've talked about. We've been through this process before, as Jim had just said. And so there are things obviously that, you know, whatever really kind of comes up through the advisory board and from the teachers and staff in the schools and all of that, and the parents, you know, it's going to be there's not a list. We do not have a list, Jim, that I'm aware of. We could provide, I'm sure it's a public document, a copy of the current MOU.
Thank you. Okay. And then the other question, I guess, was just wanting to know when future public meetings, I think particularly with our school boards, were happening. And Jim very helpfully shared his email address in the chat if folks have the opportunity to find that there, if you're interested in being kept in the loop of when those next.
I don't have the dates memorized. I know that next, and I don't want to misspeak and say the wrong meeting, but I know there's a school board meeting next week, and then I believe 2 the following week, but I just off the top of my memory don't remember which district is next week and which 2 are the following week. But I can certainly share those with, again, I put my email in the chat to take any questions that either don't get answered or information that I don't have readily available to be able to respond to that.
Okay, and then I see a question in the chat from now our teachers are overwhelmed, schools are not fully staffed, they're finding themselves having more and more students in their classes and feel they are spending most of their time managing behavior. Will there be benchmarks set to ensure these schools are fully staffed before changes are made? Oh,
I'd love to say that we're going to have all of our buildings staffed before changes are made, but with the number of superintendents around the room, I would argue that they would love to have their building staffed before the school year started. And sometimes that's just not something that's viable based on the number of teachers available and that are applying for those positions. It's certainly the goal to make sure that we have all the buildings staffed, whether it's the current or the ones that we are in the process of hoping to get those to participate in this collaborative.
okay. And then I see Superintendent Shelton is sharing links to the MOU.
Thanks, Dan.
And I apologize if my connection is unsteady. If it gets too bad, I know Matt knows what to do. At this point, I'll ask if there are any other questions or comments, or we ask for any closing comments from the governor and his team.
And I just did receive information that at least one of the presentations, Brandywine School District's board meeting is November 15th.
Okay,
Christina's is this coming Tuesday.
Redcliffe is the 17th.
okay, as a consortium, we'll gather those dates and share them with consortium members and out on our social media. I think that would help. Okay. Maria, that's an old hand, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll put it down.
And then one final question. We did get another one in the chat. You know, someone voicing that as a product of the old Wilmington schools, you know, praising the wonderful educators there. Their concern is the rush to begin in the fall and just asking why the timeline.
Well, I'll answer that question. I have a tremendous sense of urgency. We're already 5 years into this, and we haven't made the kind of movement that I would have liked to have seen, frankly. We had a proposal that got close to the finish line with the WEAC proposal 5 years ago that had included probably the hardest part, which is how to figure out the redistricting piece. We believe that this would supports the work that all of you are doing. And so there's a sense of urgency that, as I said, the children that were in kindergarten are in first grade or in 4th and 5th grade now, and we can't afford to wait any longer. I know, and that's not to question all the great work that the folks on the screen are doing in their individual districts, but we've got to do something different. And this is, that's why you are all together as a consortium to come up with ideas to do that. We know that this was part of one of the ideas that you were looking at. It's an idea that we looked at 4 or 5 years ago, and we've decided to take the lead and push this as a way to move forward.
Right. I think as you know, as we've discussed, some of the items that we're working on as a consortium are big, heavy lifts, and we know that, you know, they're going to take time. And of course, I think we all want to see the needle move while we're doing our work. And so we're open to hearing about what some options might be. I saw Ray's hand and then Matt's hand again. Ray?
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to share that the Wilmington Center for Education Equity and Policy is working with the governor and the team to do this, to make certain that we do everything possible to dig really deeper than those that would typically attend these kind of meetings, to make certain that people are aware of the conceptual proposal and the possibilities of it, and to gain feedback unfiltered, and so that can also be shared with the governor and the team. And I just wanted to let folks know we'll be calling on you. We've had several gatherings of people, and through the Coalition of 100 Black Women, the Metropolitan Wilmington Urban League, and others, and we'll be calling upon you to identify people that are probably not necessarily in the pipeline to get this information, so that we can build awareness and understanding. So I just wanted to say that. I also want to thank Secretary Bunting for her service.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you. Matt, you put your hand down, but you're unmuted, so.
No, I just wanted to thank the governor and his team for being here and, you know, having this exchange with folks. And we get in Delaware, I think, a little spoiled, and we assume that, you know, everybody everywhere gets the chance to talk directly to the governor about these kinds of issues, and this is actually pretty unusual.
For an hour, for a whole hour.
Right, that there would be this level of give and take. So I just wanted to thank them for being here and being willing to entertain all these questions.
Well, thank you for that, Matt, but also thank you for the opportunity to be with all of you. We're all in this together, and we're not going to get the positive change that we all are looking for if we don't rally behind a common approach to these challenges. Let's make no mistake about it. These are the hard, difficult issues, but I'm convinced that this is a model that will take us to a better place, in addition to the work that all of you are doing. And I just want to thank you for that work, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you tonight. And we're going to, as the superintendents each said, we'll be seeing them in the next couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you so much for spending all this time with us and for digging in on some pretty particular questions. And I know as people continue to digest, they'll have more, and you know, we as the consortium will work with our members and those who participate in our processes to hear those and share those with you. And you know, we'll try to tune in for the school board meetings as well. So thank you. Thank you very much. We can give the governor a round of applause and your team for all your hard work. There we go. That's what we just finished. That's the bulk of our agenda. We do have another important agenda item for this month that we would like to talk about. The governor was excited to see this, this screen. This is a carryover. Matt, did you want to take this? You're muted.
Sure, we can, or you can, whatever is easier.
No, go for it. Go for it. I'll piggyback off of your comment.
Okay. So at our last meeting, Secretary Geisenberger had reminded us that the governor's office and all the state agencies were about to start the process of putting together the governor's proposed budget that he would be recommending to the General Assembly in January, and that it was important that the consortium weigh in on that process, given that we had advocated for some programs to start in the budget that was just passed last July, and we thought that was a good suggestion, and we wanted to follow through on that. And we thought that the best way to do that would be to have the co-chairs of the working groups that had come up with some of these recommendations develop some recommendations for the state agencies for the budget that's being put together now. So our request tonight was that the consortium authorize the co-chairs of the educator work group and the social determinants work group to draft recommendations that would be consistent with their work group's prior work that could be passed along to the Department of Education and the Office of Management and Budget, and ultimately to the governor's office, for them to use as they were putting together the governor's recommended budget. So the request tonight would just be to authorize the co-chairs of those two work groups to put those together and pass them along to the state agencies.
Do you have any questions from consortium members about that? Oh, Superintendent Sheldon, I see your hand.
I know in those two work groups, there may be a business manager, but I'm honestly not sure there is. I would request that a business manager or two or three or four be a part of that group as well, since they have the inner workings knowledge.
Senator, my suggestion as to the best thing to do would be if we were to ask the chairs to actually put together the recommendations, and they know their groups, and I think we should be able to rely on them to reach out to business managers, et cetera, to make sure that they're getting all the input they need. But just for practical reasons, I think it's probably it probably makes the most sense for us to authorize Noel and Mike and Ray and Jeff to actually put pen to paper once they've done that type of outreach.
You took the words out of my mouth. I think that is important feedback, that they do, do their homework and have those conversations with those key individuals. That's the big ask I think we're asking of them, that we're authorizing. But I think I agree with you. Secretary Bunting, your hand is up.
Just a point of information, our budget from the Department of Ed will be turned in tomorrow. That's the deadline. We have our appearance before the Office of Management and Budget in about 2 weeks. But that's just a part of the process. And as you mentioned, that is looked at by OMB and the governor's office, and some of it, I hope a lot of it, will appear in the budget that is presented in January, but it's a long process. We're working on this together through June 30th.
Yes. Thank you, Secretary Bunting. And Secretary Geisenberger, your hand is up. You're the culprit behind all this. So
yeah, I mean, I do want everybody to know sort of the timing, which is, as Secretary Bunting just said, there's a hearing for DOE coming up soon, and all of the departments will have their hearings. My department submitted its budget 2 weeks ago. Was required to submit its budget 2 weeks ago. But while everybody knows that the governor's budget comes out the last week of January, it really closes, pretty much in the middle of December. So I do think it's important to the extent that these groups are going to deliberate, to get that information. There's really only a couple of weeks to get this information to us, because the deliberations will be going on throughout really the next 6 weeks. So, and things that show up at the very last day of deliberations are unlikely to make it into. So,
got it. That's helpful, Matt. Helpful feedback. Gives us a scope of time. to work with. Any other feedback or questions before we, I think, would be looking for a motion? I'm looking for hands, both physical and,
This is Tika Hartzog.
oh, hi, Tika.
Hi. I motion to adjourn.
No, Wendy, not yet.
Oh, a motion for this? Oh,
Well,
I was
thanks.
like, oh man, we're getting out of here early tonight. I was
We are
jumping
getting
at that
early, but
chance.
first we need the motion to authorize our co-chairs.
Second, I
to
second
do the-
Tika's
No,
second,
stop it,
sorry.
Jeff.
See, I started something.
This is a good one. No, first we need that motion and then we need to approve our minutes and then you can motion to adjourn. So if you can
Oh
just
man,
hold
maybe
tight
for
for
the
like
reverse order. It threw me off.
5 more minutes. If there are no further questions on this authorization of those co-chairs. Sorry.
Senator, I just have one question. The secretary button is still there.
Yes.
In her budget, was anything allotted to the consortium, to this new idea?
Do you mean the collaborative?
The collaborative, I'm sorry.
Maria, I don't have that in front of me this very minute. There are pieces of it that could contribute to that, but I think overall, our budget is basically the budget for our department and schools, but there are pieces in there that will transfer over.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Lockman, if I could jump in really quickly, I'm sorry, just to answer that question for Maria. This is something that we've been talking about for the governor's recommended budget, which it would be a little different than what Dr. Bunting is submitting. So we're talking about it for the GRB. So it wouldn't be in Dr. Bunting, something that the governor is looking at for his piece of the budget.
Thank you. So I'm just going to try to briefly restate the ask. So what we have in mind, of course, is, we were able to secure resources to support recommendations that we made official around this time last year. And we're looking now to authorize that our co-chairs put into writing and ask for those elements of that we're leaving at their discretion. To potentially be worked into agency budgets. This is something that we were talking about last year. We wanted to look for ways to sustain some of these asks. I think there's, and this is our opportunity to give authorization to those co-chairs to put those into their words, rather than Matt and I necessarily doing that on their behalf.
So move, Senator. You got your motion. So move.
Thank you. I was
I
going
will
to just
second.
keep talking until I got it. Thanks.
I'll
I think we got a second from
I'll
Aaron
second.
Taft. All right. So we have that. And so, sorry, Haley, Kelly, do we want to do a roll call?
Sure, I will go down the list. Representative Chakotcha,
Yes.
Representative Smith,
Yes.
Darrell Green,
Yes.
Dan Shelton,
Yes.
Jeff Menzer,
Yes.
Link Kohler,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
let's see, Mayor Persicki, or William Clark, Margie Lopez Waite,
Yes.
Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Maria Matos.
Yes.
I believe Gwen Angelette is on for Hanifa Shabazz. Nope. Ray Jones Avery,
Yes.
Aaron Bass,
Yes.
Danye Woods. She's still here? Nope. Noel Picara,
Yes.
Tika Hartzog,
Yes.
and I believe that is every, oh, nope, sorry, Senator Lockman,
Yes, thanks.
Matt Den.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay,
Received
so
enough votes.
That sounded adequate. Great. Thank you so much. And so we can move on from there, and we will now go back to the minutes approval that we skipped. This should be much easier. Hopefully you have an opportunity to review these. Came to you in your email. So again, we're looking for a motion and a second, and then we'll get to do that roll call again. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Matos. Kelly, it's all you.
All right. Representative Chapocha?
Yes.
Kelly, if I could interrupt you very quickly, we skipped Senator Lopez on the last one.
I am so sorry, Senator. I did not see you on.
But let's make sure we get him this time, and maybe he can double vote, cast his vote for both. I'm not sure that's kosher, but we'll get it.
So sorry. All right, so I heard Representative Chapocha, Senator Lopez.
I know he's on the phone. Senator, well.
All right,
Maybe
we'll come
not.
back. Representative Smith,
Yes.
Darrell Green,
Yes.
Dan Shelton,
Yes.
Jeff Menzer,
Yes.
Lynn Kohler,
Yes.
Joseph Jones,
Yes.
Margie Lopez Waite, Stephanie Ingram,
Yes.
Maria Matos,
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery,
Yes.
Aaron Bass,
Yes.
here Noel Picara,
Yes.
Tika Hartsock.
Yes.
And Senator Lopez is here. We need to unmute him on our end. He has a phone number, the 598 number. Now everybody knows. Sorry, Senator Lopez.
Haley, can you unmute?
You're gonna get all the crank calls.
I can only ask to unmute.
If
Okay.
he,
Let
if he
me,
dials, I think it's either *5 or *6. He should be able to unmute himself.
Hey guys, can everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Hey friends. Marked present, voting yes multiple times. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Matt Den,
Yes.
Senator Lockman.
Yes.
All right, good.
Okay.
Required number of votes.
Okay, that's good. And Tika, don't get too excited. We're not going to do the motion to adjourn yet. We're going to move into public comment. Whose birthday? Oh my God, it's not until Sunday. But thank you, everyone. Hold your applause. All right. So at this time, we would ask for any member, someone who's not a member of the consortium who would like to make a comment. You do have a 3-minute maximum. And we're happy to do that. I think I saw a physical hand raised from Bill Doolittle, but I did see Representative Ramon first. So I'm going to go to Representative Ramon. And Bill, then we'll come back to you, and we'll keep an eye out for any other hands. Representative Ramon?
Thank you, Senator. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yeah, I just wanted to first of all thank everyone for all the work on this. I think it's very clear with all the different directions and all the different dialogue that there's clearly an issue that needs to be resolved. And I do think speed is of the essence, but we don't want to just haste into any kind of error. But more importantly, I think the people who work so hard for our state, sometimes when they pass, sometimes we miss that. And I know many people here know this, but many don't, that we lost a great superintendent of Colonial a few weeks ago, George Meany. And I just heard recently that also Governor Minner passed away. So maybe if everyone could keep those families in their prayers tonight, that would be a wonderful thing. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Representative Ramon. We were able to hear some wonderful tributes from both Matt Den and our governor at the beginning for Governor Minner, and do a moment of silence. And thank you for letting us know about the passing of Mr. Meany as well.
Thank
Okay. Bill. It's all you.
Hello, Bill Doolittle. In listening to the governor's presentation, I think it is a reasonable path forward. Of course, I'm a detail person, so I pick on things that I don't think we've quite gotten to the 100% point on. I heard a little discussion that there's ongoing school construction. I know there's going to have to be more to bring the city up to where it needs to be. And I'm very concerned that we continue to use what is an extremely antiquated school construction formula that has absolutely no needs-based variability in it to represent our kids of high need. I think that's something we need to dig into. I've done it on the special education end, and on that end, it ends up being 15 to 20% more square footage is needed to configure the schools properly for those students' needs. And I think probably a similar number is there for poverty. I'm also always frustrated when I hear the teacher retention discussion, and it never really gets to the root area. Every teacher I talk to who's making that decision to leave a high need school, their number one reason is that they do not feel they can be successful. And they all say the cause is the same thing: resources. Now, while those resources may be leaders, it's also enough bodies in the building, both teachers and support personnel. It's a building that's proper and configured to actually meet their students' needs. And so I don't think we can make real progress until we look at this holistically and begin to address those issues. And of course, that comes down to the funding issue. We're making progress, and appreciative of that, but I'll just remind everybody that even the full settlement is in place, it might be somewhere in the range of $15 million for Wilmington schools. Our best analysis of what we need in the way of funding to meet the needs of students in poverty in Wilmington is $80 million a year. So we've got 15 out of 80. So I'll just leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, as always. We'll give us a beat to see if anyone else would like to raise their hand within Zoom or on camera. I'll look for hands here. Kelly and Haley, let me know if I'm missing anyone. Okay, going. Okay, do not see any hands. So I'll just again say thanks to anyone from the governor's team that's still on with us, and certainly thank you to all members of the consortium, our work groups, contributors to the work of our work groups, absolutely our staff, as always. In between these bi-monthly meetings, there's a lot of conversation and a lot of work that happens so that we can continue to move forward. And you know, these are just the highlights. So thank you to everyone, and thank you to everyone who just tuned in tonight. And with that, Tika, I see you are back on screen. It's
our moment.
It's your moment.
I make a motion to adjourn our meeting for this evening.
Okay, and I think everyone will second that. Enjoy an extra 40 minutes of your Thursday evening. And we will see you in working groups and elsewhere and school board meetings again soon. So thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.